Here's what I think is great about you being a third-party voice for your clients is we've all been in those C-suite or board meetings, and we're talking about how's this quarter doing? How are we going to be doing next quarter? It's very short-term focused, and we talk about what's in our way, what's the go-to-market plan, and how are we accomplishing this? The challenges to that go-to-market plan, usually we point outside. We usually point to external things. We don't go into those board meetings saying, what are the greatest challenges is ourselves. We got to get out of our own way. So I think that having a third party voice that comes in and says, look, I've worked with lots of different organizations, and that internal clarity is one of the biggest challenges. How is this received when you're talking with your clients? You're talking about this internal clarity and what we need to do. Is it well received? Do they acknowledge it? Or is it something that you have to educate them on?
There's two things that most people say, and one of my clients coined this very well. She said, "You know what, Afshan? I'm glad you came at this time because if you came a year earlier, we would have never said our baby was ugly until there's some understanding that we have pain points here that we need to really solve for versus looking at things with rose-colored glasses saying, we're fine. We're doing great. Look at our numbers. We're doing fantastic. There's nothing to fear." I'll give you a quick story. I used to work for a very large global bank, and we were a digital bank, so it didn't have bricks and mortars, so everything was all digital. And we were the only digital bank at that time back in the early 2000s. We go, no one's going to come in because it's very hard to get a license. Well, within a year of us saying that, we had three competitors. So sometimes to be forward thinking, you've really got to be transparent, and you don't have to necessarily tell everybody your sins, but you need to be clear about what's working and what's not working without pointing fingers. Work together to say, okay, what are the solutions? So we never come in to say, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong, because that doesn't help anybody. This is what you've done well, and here's how you can do something differently, and how this will actually enable you to be prosperous in the future. Because people have done a lot of good work in organizations to get them to that point. So you shouldn't disregard that at all. I think we should celebrate that. But we also need to look forward to say, hey, this part could use fine tuning. This part needs to revamp. There's the last conversation I had with a client just before I get on is that we need to disrupt your paradigms. And that is a very important part that we've got to help people with. And it's not a flash cut, it's a gradual kind of development of that disruption.
Now, I imagine that when you disrupt paradigms, there is a message for middle level management, there is a message for the employee base, but there's a message for leadership and a buy in of leadership. Everything tends to work better when you have the support of leadership. So, how does that sell in process work? Do you start with leadership? Do you start with middle management? What's the best way to create that paradigm shift?
It always starts at the top because if the people at the top don't believe it, they can't actually support the actions and the activities of the people that are in the middle or even at the bottom. It's a trickle down. And where it's a bottom up is the feedback. So the bottom up saying, hey, it's working, it's not working, I've had this issue. And that's where the bottom up goes back to the C level. Like when we bring our programs in, we always want to make sure that the COO, the CFO, the CEO all buy in because what we do is a cultural change, whether it's making an organization customer centric and efficient at the same time, or helping them through change as they implement AI. Because AI doesn't come out of the box, as we all know. It has to be trained, but there's a whole people component to it that people aren't understanding in terms of the skills that will be needed in the future. So all of this wrapped together really has to come from the C-suite with some clarity and some direction. And then we help with what are the techniques? What are the strategies used to bring this change into the organization? And I'll just say one last thing is that I see a lot of companies with change management teams. And when I see these teams and I work with these teams, it's all about the communication of what needs to change and not so much on how it needs to change. It's the how that really is where the rubber meets the road, as they say.